Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Ayana Jones. I'm the ID Mentorship 365 Program Manager for the IDSA Foundation. I thank you all for joining us today for our webinar, Social Media and Online Engagement. This is in continuation of our ID Mentorship 365 webinar series. Special thanks to our speakers who we will introduce here shortly. But before I turn it over to our today's moderator, we have a few housekeeping reminders. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on our YouTube channel and on Cooper. So if you can't stay for the entire presentation, that's okay. It'll be made available to you. Again, the presentation itself will also be uploaded to Cooper. And if you can't access it via Cooper, we'll again have it on our YouTube channel. You'll notice that your microphones are muted currently, but feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask questions during the event. There will be a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentations where you can kind of come off camera and unmute yourselves and just kind of actively participate. And then if we don't get to all the questions today, we will just record your questions and send them to the speakers to answer, and we'll follow up via email. And then finally, as you know, we are on social media at IDSA Foundation across all platforms. So feel free to post or share your takeaways from today's discussion. Tag us using the hashtag IDM365. And yeah, so we'll get started. Now I would like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, IDSA's Mentorship and Recruitment Co-Chair, Dr. Layla Watt-Colborn. Dr. Watt-Colborn is an associate professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Emory. She is very passionate she's a passionate clinical educator, and she conducted her fellowship at Case Western Reserve University in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. So I will pass it over to you, Dr. Watt-Colborn.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. I thank you for joining. I know it's sometimes a difficult week, especially in some parts of the country where we have spring break. So thank you for joining us. This particular topic for us is it's important. One, because we know social media can't be profound and reaches across several domains, as improved clinical care and advocacy, data analysis, broad, rich, diverse patient population, educational access. And in 2019, the Infectious Disease Society of America started the Digital Strategy Advisory Group in order how to use digital strategy. And since then, now almost 5 years later, it has taken its own little niche, how important this is. So we wanted to bring this as part of the mentoring because it's at the right time to start talking about that. With that, I would like to introduce the first speaker. We have two speakers today. Our first speaker is Lula Halisali. She's from Cura Strategy. She's a public relations consultant specializing in strategic communications within the wellness landscape. Lula Halisali leverages her multidisciplinary skills in media relations, social media, influencing, research, and marketing to provide engaging and impactful service to her clients. Having worked with a variety of clients in the hospital safety, maternal health, diabetes, mental health, and cardiology spaces. She has experience across healthcare sectors, including trade association, medtech, and nonprofit management. Lula is also passionate about engaging patients with actionable health information. So with that, I'll let Lula talk to us about what is that she does best.
Thank you for that warm introduction, and thank you to IDSA Foundation for having me here today. Great. So these are the agenda items that I have For you all, I'll be going over what social media is, just a general explanation. I'll also be touching on how you can use social media in your professional career. And then we'll discuss the best practices for creating engaging content. And then lastly, we'll touch on the use of social media to stay informed within your field. So what is social media? By definition, social media is a collective term for websites and applications that focus on mainly communication, interaction, content sharing, and of course, collaboration. The icons you see here below are some of the social platforms that are well known that can be used for both professional and personal. Personal being to kind of stay in touch and interact with friends and family, as well as communities, and then to network and promote your skills and experience in ID. I'll be focusing on LinkedIn, but Dr. Butt will be able to touch on the other social platforms and how you can relate it to ID. So how can you use social media in your professional career? Well, you can start by using your LinkedIn account to develop and maintain your brand as an ID professional. And you can start by asking yourself these questions. How do you want others to see you? What have you accomplished? And while doing so, you'll be able to maintain your image to solely attract other professionals. This means mentors and mentees like yourselves, other ID professionals. It also means connecting with recruiters and perhaps organizations that you potentially see yourself working at. So just consider your brand being tied to the network that you see yourself being in. It is generally advised to avoid sharing personal details on LinkedIn, details that are not relevant to your ID profession. Again, this does not mean if, let's say, your latest research you were able to publish it in a journal, that's both a personal and a professional milestone that is very much appropriate for you to share on LinkedIn. And lastly, select your connections wisely. Colleagues, other ID professionals, folks from different organizations, again, where you potentially see yourself working at would be very appropriate for you to network on LinkedIn. And friends and families are, of course, acceptable. Just keeping in mind that when you have people coming in your way, make sure you vet it. If you're not familiar with them, make sure you're really looking into who they are, what organizations they're affiliated with. LinkedIn would be the one account where you really, really need to consider who you're networking with and not accepting everyone. So what are the best practices for creating engaging content, right? Be mindful of your audience when posting. Before you post anything on LinkedIn, start by asking yourself, what is the topic of my content? Am I addressing a matter? If so, is it backed with facts? We also encourage you to engage with others as often as you can. This will kind of invite other members to come visit your page to, as you're engaging with them, they will start engaging back with your content. This means liking, comment, reposting, resharing, anything that's kind of aligned with that. Another way of creating an engaging content is by using hashtags and visuals to help your content stand out. As you can see on the right, we have an example of this gentleman. He is an infectious disease professional. He had a brief blurb of what the topic is. Then he made sure to tag the organization that he potentially partnered with. He also made sure to include different sorts of hashtags, and he could have just left it there. But in order to really help stand out his post, he included a visual. It's the smallest things that kind of really differentiate you from others on your feed. And then lastly, stay consistent. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to post every day, but it is advised for you to engage with others as often as you can. Stay consistent with it, because when you're liking, when you're commenting, you start to pop up on other people's feed and you're encouraging them to come visit your page and also comment and like and repost whatever it is that you're posting. How can you use social media to stay informed within your field? Well, set up your social media accounts so relevant information comes to you. What does that mean? Ask yourself, are you following? industry thought leaders, the right people within your field? Are you following news outlets? Are you following educational institutions, whether it is the ones you attend or perhaps that go hand in hand with your own field? Are you following different organizations? For example, are you following IDSA Foundation? It helps you keep up with trends. It helps you keep up with information that's going on within your profession. You can also take leverage by exploring through the hashtags that these different folks are using. It helps you kind of explore more of what's going on. You can also join social groups and discussions that's kind of industry related groups. You can also share your thoughts when you see interesting posts. LinkedIn has this algorithm where the more you stay consistent posting, it kind of raises your visibility to others. You start showing up on other people's recommendations to perhaps network with and all sorts. So, and then lastly, this may seem a bit excessive, but really you need to turn your notifications on to stay alert. How can you really stay informed within your field if the simple things aren't done, such as turning your notifications on? So I wanted to leave you all with this resource that we developed at Cura Strategies. It's a LinkedIn optimization. It pretty much covers how to attract other professionals by revising your header for searchability. It covers the importance of different LinkedIn profile features, such as posts, recommendations, and kind of have a better understanding on how to position your about section, because that's the first thing that people see when they try to look up your information on LinkedIn. So it is accessible. It doesn't require you to sign up or put in your information. You can easily access it through scanning the QR code, or you can also access it through the link that's being shared in the chat. But yeah, this is available to you all. And let me know if you have any questions. Please feel free to reach me out at this email address. And thank you for your time. I'll be passing it back to Dr. Layla.
Thank you. Thank you, Lula. That was a wonderful introduction and a good segue for our next speaker, a very dear colleague and friend, Dr. Saira Butt. She is an associate professor of clinical medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases in Indiana University. She is the fellowship director for the division there. And she's joined Indiana University since 2016 and served, as I said, as the fellowship director. One of the things that you're going to see is part of her work that she has done, not just for herself, but for the medical education, using the different sites of social media to do that, to enhance medical education through the outreach and show her passion. So it's a pleasure for me to give it away to Dr. Saira Butt.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So yeah, let's get started. So I will be talking about social media and online engagement. So I think first things first, most of the social media platforms let you have multiple accounts. So my first advice would be separate your personal and academic accounts. So if you like, fashion, sports, have a separate account for that, and then have a separate account for your academic presence. So I generally run my own account, which is Saira BT, but then I also run the IUID fellowship. This is on X or Twitter, and I also do the same for the Instagram for our IUID fellowship as well. So next slide, please. So what is social media and why should physicians care? So basically, as Lula was talking about, these are multiple websites or applications that you can use. But for physicians, this is an area where you can either create and share your content, or you can actually participate in social networking. So we'll talk more ways how to do that in the next few slides. This was an open forum infectious diseases paper by Dr. Ryder from University of Nebraska. He looked at social media use by different ID fellowships in US. And there were about 222 fellowships that they looked at. Out of those, 158 were adult. And mostly the X or Twitter was the most likely platform that was used. But it was about 31 to 37%. Facebook was much less than 7%. And the Insta at that time was around 7% by different fellowships. The programs who use social media were the ones that have large faculty, a lot of fellows, and also the ones who have higher 5-year match rates. And then they talk about what kind of content they use mostly. On X or Twitter was educational, about 60%, and on Facebook is mostly promotional, and Insta is used more for social activities, promoting all the social activities the fellows are doing. So we'll move to the next one. Yeah, so as everyone knows, TikTok is getting the most popular platform these days. There was about 16% increase in previous years, so there are about 1.5 billion users of TikTok. But I feel like at this point, it is not a very good platform for medical education, but it definitely has potential. So this poster was at ID Week last year, talking about antibiotic talk on TikTok. This is an opportunity for patient education. So basically, they searched the term antibiotic and saw how many people on TikTok were talking about antibiotics. Only a quarter were by healthcare professionals, and those were the ones that were valid. All the other ones, there's a lot of background noise. So I think this is a potential for us to use and have healthcare workers' presence there. I listed a couple of ones that are good. Micro.tv, they have multiple podcasts and videos that they also share there on TikTok, which is good to follow. Next slide, please. So on Instagram, there are multiple accounts now, a lot of ID fellowships, even the paper we just talked about. Since then, more ID fellowships have joined Instagram, so it's a good place to follow. A lot of them put promotional and educational stuff. So a couple ones that are like, obviously I run the IUID fellowship, but the Temple ID and University of Minnesota, they have good content. They're pretty consistent in their content. You can, of course, follow CDC, you can follow IDSA. Also some good accounts with PharmDs. One of them is ID Stewardship, which generally have very funny memes to help you remember certain things. So we'll move on to the next one. Of course, this is my most favorite, I think, the podcast, easy way to keep up to date with all the content. And Febrile is, I think, leads out of all the ID podcasts these days. So I did put a link, and they recently had a paper about the platform. So in OFID, if you want to check it out. But then some other ones, ID right now is doing Let's Talk ID. This is an informal way of learning about different fields of ID. So it's a good way, especially if you're a student or you don't know which field to take in ID. I think that's a very good way to learn how things work or how people work in day-to-day life. And then Infectious Diseases PUSCAT sort of is a review of all the journal articles in past couple of weeks. Great way to stay up to date, even if you're not having the time to look at all the new journal articles. And then the pharmacy, PharmDs, they run breakpoints, which is great, especially if you're in stewardship. And then there's some IM podcasts as well. Next slide. So there are many ways to use Twitter or X, and many ways to get engaged. There are chats, there are tutorials, there are threads, there are memes. And I can show you later how to, search for certain people to follow. But just for medical, since this is more about medical education, Dr. Spicer from Emory runs this MedEd Twag team, which are short tutorials, great way to learn a little bit about medical education or how to incorporate that in your daily practice. There's ID Journal Club, which sort of goes over practice-changing journal articles. And we have been meeting at ID Week. Below is a picture where we met last year during ID Week. All the people who engage in ID Journal Club actually meet, so it's great. You can have other things like medical book club, or there's some other humanism or arts and medicine. So many other ways, depending on your area of interest, you can always find your peers there. So next slide. So yeah, I mean, I think this is very, very basic. If you don't know, I think Lula alluded to that. It's always a good idea to have a picture or image. For Insta, that's basically given. You have to have a picture, but even for X, Twitter, or other accounts, when you put a picture, to your tweet, it really gets a lot of engagement. So always include a picture if you can. I generally run the ID board review. So I use my hashtag, which is the ID board review. You can use, everybody was using ID Twitter since the name has changed. Some people are using ID Expose. Some people use ID MedEd, or you can use just MedEd. So different hashtags, you have to look what are popular, what ID people are using, you can use those. And then tag people. So especially if you're talking about a certain journal article, you can tag those authors, or if you know certain people are expert in that and you have a question, let's say a bone and joint question, you can tag people who are experts on those fields, so they can, you can directly communicate with them that way. Just wanted to give a shout out about promotion. There was this tweet by one of our faculty of a resident, like how he took great history and went across the borders, like called in a different country to obtain a history. We always say history is our procedure in ID. So, and that is a good way to promote your residents. And now that person is a fellow at Emory. So lots of ways to get engaged and promote others. So next slide. So there are multiple chats as well that you can follow, and I'll talk about ID chats in other slides. Before moving on, I forgot to mention there are some graphic images in some of these slides, so just be aware of those. So next slide. Yeah, so this is one of those. So how to use it, like depending on whatever trends are going on in social media, you can use those trends, but use it for ID education. And this is a great example by Dr. Schwartz, who is at Duke, how it started, how it's going. So in the picture, you see the oysters, and then you see Vibrio cholera causing hemorrhagic bulli. Great way. If you explain it in a question format, it will take multiple words, but just 2 images, and it's a great way of showing how. I love the way it was used. Or somebody had an aquarium and now they come with these lesions, and this is Mycobacterium mirinum. Or somebody who skinned rodents and now they have oculoglandular tularemia. So great visuals to send your point across. Next slide. Another way is memes. And this is Dr. Shah from Mayo ID, who have great memes. As you can see, like health workers hiding from burnout, or reviewer 2, or asking somebody to DC wank, or having imposter syndrome. So great examples of using medical education on social media. Next slide. Yeah, and you can also use it for your academic promotion. So a lot of academic centers these days are now looking into social media. So you can, let's say you have a new publication, you post it on your social media. It requires many people to click on it, to link, and that will increase your metrics. And this is the metrics they're using for your promotion. So great way to promote yourself or your peers. Next slide. I think this is the main point of this conversation. If you guys know about medical education or education in general, there's this pyramid of Bloom's taxonomy that we used, which is the traditional Bloom's taxonomy on the left side, which shows remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create, versus the modified Bloom's taxonomy, which I call for social media. So you can consume, you can then promote your materials, you can discuss, and then you can create. And you can do these things overlap them or do them one at a time. So if you don't have any presence at this time, just start with consumption. So just consume, and then slowly you'll make your way up. And I'll give some examples of all of these. Next slide. How do we consume? So for example, on X or Twitter or on Instagram, you can just go search certain hashtags. So for infectious disease, you can do ID Twitter, or you can just do ID or infectious disease or ID Foundation. So multiple ways to look for. And then within those hashtags, you can look for top people, you can look for media, you can look for ID lists that people have created. So that way you start following those people after. So you have to build your network. This is how you will build it. The other best way is following hashtags of national meeting. Like recently there was CROI. So CROI 2024, you will search for it. Then you'll see all the people that those are tweeting or putting their Instagram pictures. You can start following them that way. So yeah, these are just some examples how to do it. And I can give more examples. Somebody had questions. Other things to do on social media, follow your favorite journals that you follow in general. So clinical infectious disease, OFID, Lancet, NEJM, SHE, MMWR, those are great ones to follow. Next slide. Yeah. And then how do you promote yourself? So let's say you start consuming, you start following all these accounts that are like-minded or you want to follow, but then how do you promote yourself? So let's say you create a case, you want to put it on. So make sure you use the correct hashtags. You can create some personal hashtags that are only yours and no one else is using it. You can do that as well. You can create ID Chalk Talk. So many ways to promote yourself. You can even do a Post-it note. Like that's the simplest again. Let's say you just are rounding with the students and you just gave them an important ID pearl. Just write it down on a Post-it and you can just post a picture of that as well. So very easy to get engaged. The idea is should not take a lot of your time. Next slide. And then discuss. So this is what we were talking about previously. These are especially related to ID. So journal clubs or chats. The Transplant ID does a Transplant ID chat, which is great. So you can follow that. They will generally put on which day they're going to have it. There is a stewardship and a microbial stewardship chat or ACP chat. I've not been using Threads, but there is another platform, Threads, which is similar to X. So you can also link your Instagram account to your Threads and do the same engagement there. So that's another platform to use. Next slide. And this is what I generally do. I put what is called tutorials on X. You can do the same. I mostly paste them on the Instagram as well. But let's say I had a case with pictures, and then the explanation follows. It creates a tutorial, and you can do that with your references as well. Next slide. Create. So this is when your social engagement starts. So I just put some old examples of how after you've been consuming and creating your content, people will start reaching out to you. So this antibiotic a few years ago was very new, metacycline. This is a neurotetracycline, and somebody knew that I had used it. So they tagged me, and then I replied that I had a couple of patients on it. This became a multinational cohort of different people who have used it. And then we had a poster, and recently we actually had a publication in CID talking about the use of this antibiotic. So just talking about people can message you. So make sure it's all academic and you can talk to them and engage that way as well. Next slide. Some other examples. I always give this example with Dr. Walensky. This is the year before COVID. So this is 2019 ID week. And there's always 7 a.m. breakfast for women in ID. And I was running late. It was at 7 a.m. and finally made it. The room was all full. And this person, who was Dr. Walensky, said that I can share the chair with her. And it was such an honor. And then later she becomes CDC director. So, I mean, you make connections, and I stayed in touch, which is great. And then some other groups that I met, Women in Medicine is another group, which is not related to ID, but Women in Medicine, who talk a lot about the things that women in ID care about: salary gap, gender discrimination, lack of support. They have a lot of resources these days if you go on their page. So you make your connections, you find your group. Next slide. Some other engagements I have gotten, like people will contact you and I had a podcast, I had some blog. I asked for advice. So Dr. Bobby Pritt at Mayo Clinic, she's a very renowned parasitologist, had a very difficult case. So I just messaged her, and she basically walked on the case through me, and I really helped with the patient care. Another example was one of the IM program directors at Mayo at that time, and I was a new program director and was looking for mentorship, and I messaged her, and we sort of started meeting every few weeks on Zoom just to give me advice. So you can find your network even if you don't have it available to you. So next slide. Yeah, so I think this is the last slide. So Again, you use it based on your needs. You find your peers, but these are just general guidelines, things not to do. Always stay professional, be responsible, maintain separation from personal and professional lives, very transparent, always follow the copyright rules. Do not disclose any patient information. Sometimes I see don't even say that I saw this patient last week and this is, and kind of giving a scenario. You're not giving any identifiers, but people may know where you work, and patients or other people can figure out who that you are talking about. So avoid all of those. And definitely avoid politics. You can do that if you want to in your personal accounts, but don't do it on your academic accounts. If there's anything that you're unaware of, you can always check with your legal department. And yeah, just be aware risk to privacy and security. And that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was thank you, Saira. That was a fantastic talk and a incredible review of, you know, what you've gone through and in social media as someone who does follow you in different platforms besides X and Instagram. I would like to invite everybody to turn on their mics and video if they can, and we are open to questions. We had some questions emailed to us earlier. And so one is kind of it's Lula and Saira went over how to get started. Definitely the LinkedIn is the professional one. And then you have other ways to continue to grow your SoMe empire. I also want to make a plug for the supplement from Clinical Infectious Diseases. It was from September 2022. People might have not read it because it was during the pandemic, but it goes through different manuscripts talking about social media engagement and how that can be used. So I have a question for both of you that often comes as part of promotions. Where do you put your social media in your CV? And saying that, how well is it received by the promotion committee at your institution?
Dr. Butt, I think I'll kick this off, this one to you, if that's okay.
I think you need to know how your EATS Academic Center wants it. I think these days the committees are recognizing there's a way to link it. I can show some examples, but you can put it, if you are going for promotion and your major or minor area is education, you can put under even under publications, especially if you're doing tutorials. Or you can also do it under international reach, because especially for a lot of women in medicine, it's hard to get regional or international promotion, which generally meant going somewhere and speaking, but you can use these as your international reach as well. So there are many ways to do it, and making sure you or your peers are also on those committees of promotion and tenure who are promoting that people are looking at social media engagement as well.
Yes, and so you should look at your CV. There's always a part of community engagement. There is the medical engagement. Think about, social media is also podcasts, so that is part of it. And then when, depending on your portfolio, your teaching portfolio, your service portfolio, please, you sometimes have to describe how this is. And so having some metrics helps. You can always reach to one of us who is going through promotion or has gone under promotion that can help you throughout. And both Saira and Lula mentioned how professionals, how can they be contacted? Which way do you like better to be contacted in social media, or do you have a preference?
Honestly, my recommendation would be, as long as you are deliberate about your outreach, you can contact anyone you wish to connect with, especially through LinkedIn. It is a platform that's literally designed for businesses or anything that has to do with employment. If you're reaching out to a professor, for example, it is very much appropriate for you to reach out through LinkedIn as opposed to other social platforms like X or Instagram. But if you're reaching out to a colleague that you're very much familiar with, it's okay to reach out in both LinkedIn as well as, let's say, on Instagram. If you saw some cool video that would be related to work, for example, you can share it. It's fine. But just keep in mind that you have to stay deliberate about your outreach.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. You were gonna say something, Syra, or no?
yeah, I was gonna say, and when you're reaching out to someone, whether it's on X or Insta or LinkedIn, always act like you're actually seeing that person. I always remember, like, this is how I'm seeing the person in front of me, and ask how I will ask the question, stay very professional.
Yeah, and that's very important, is being professional on asking the right questions. We sometimes get message, sometimes by, maybe bots or not bots, about things, and then you have to choose when to engage and not to engage responsibly. We will share the LinkedIn profile that Lula put in. I think it's something that we all should have some, the LinkedIn profile. That is also a way a lot of recruiters are looking into it. That's one of the first places they look. And so trying to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date with the right words and the right things is very important. It's the same thing as your header for your social media. So now that, Syra, you mentioned Threads, but we also have TikToks. And in the next year or something like that, we'll have another one, sometimes depending on the generation. Some uses more Snapchats, and we now do TikToks and Threads. Especially in what has happened with X over period, there had been some massive migration, and I think at least our ID Journal Club is trying to still find a place where to continue engagement. Either you or Syra or Lula have an idea what the next trend will be on how to get yourself engaged into that safely? Either TikTok, Threads, Snapchat, or whatever else is coming throughout.
That's a very, I don't know, very important question. Yes, as you mentioned, things will start to arise as, from generation to generation, but honestly, it's to stay informed by making sure that you're following the right platforms. If to answer your question, I have a feeling it will be related to ChatGPT or any chatbots, honestly. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's what it's looking like. Anything you'd like to add, Dr. Butt?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably some AI related, which I'm not aware of. But I mean, TikTok is definitely more popular in younger generations. So as people are graduating, they're becoming medical professionals, they may use it more. But I just, as I said, like based on the recent poster, we haven't seen a lot of medical education yet. But I feel like it's an area to grow in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to always remind everybody is that what you post on TikTok or you post in any social media is forever embedded in the virtual world. Be very mindful where you do it, because we can give you examples of maybe, I know some of my, not mine, but in general, learners who can get themselves into trouble for not posting. So always ask, and always the rule is, if you don't want it to be sharing them in the virtual world, don't post it, right? And then I think another thing to emphasize is the political realm as we enter election year, but there's a lot of controversies. You have to decide where it is, but if you're using your professional social media, it should stay professional to what you're saying. If you want to engage on, because it might be tied to your institution, and your institution does have a legal department that and communication department that might actually say difference. How do you handle when you change institutions or you go to a place and you want to post something that might be controversial with your communication department at your place of work? Either for Lula or for Syra.
I think my advice would be not to do it, and if you think it's controversial, check with your communications department before posting anything, really. The only, I think, segue to that is if you're doing advocacy, and IDSA does some advocacy for our patient care, that you can probably do in a manner, but otherwise I would check with the department, communications department, and basically stay away.
Just adding on to that, and if you do decide to proceed with it, just making sure that you're transparent about your interest and potential conflict. So make sure you have a disclosure that's very much visible to your audience.
Yeah, especially with all the controversies nowadays, right? Get the famous bots. So talking about ChatGPT and AIs, we do get bots. So another part is what happens when you now have quite a bit of a platform and someone engages you and you're going to be a paid speaker, or you start deciding that you want to change your platform to be more of an influencer and start gaining money. How do you manage that?
I can quickly chime on this one. It all starts, yes, social media is a powerful platform to leverage, especially if you're trying to move into that direction. If it is strictly professional, I would advise you to start with LinkedIn, as it is the right platform for you. But build a strong presence on social media, catering to your target audience. That should be the first thing that you need to think of. This involves writing content, writing blogs, writing or appearing in different podcasts that kind of raises your visibility in the ID field. But really building a strong presence is where you need to start with. And then you can move into the second segment, which is identifying what your topic is and then balancing your perspective. If you're being invited to speak at a particular event, just being mindful if what it is that they're interested in, what is it that your audience is interested, and then finally it's managing the expectations from all parties. All of these different things are involved into becoming a very influential figure in the industry, but it all starts how you build your strong presence.
No, that's very important. It's the build. So what tools can you give or tell people about how do you build that content? Which tools do you think? Do you use Canvas more? Do you use memes? Or I mean, besides the visual, how do you build that presence? How to make it easy?
Just like how you said it, Dr. Layla, they are free resources and tools that are available to you all out there. If you're trying to create easy graphic designs, Canva would be one. If you're trying to find different type of content ideas, it's okay to explore through the hashtags that are available to you on whatever platform it is that you're using. And then again, there's a communication department in your institution or organization that you work at, make sure you're looking at what is the right way to post a certain thing or the right way to speak about a certain topic. So just tying it back to, again, the square one, which is making sure that everything is tied back to what it is that you're trying to build.
Perfect. So, with the media content, and what is a good source for medical image to include on social media posts? And I think Syra mentioned some, but I don't know if you guys have a go-to place to pick up this medical images and not infringing copyrights.
In a communications field, we generally use Adobe stock images. You can purchase these at a cheaper price if it's tied to your organization, but if it's your own account, it tends to be a bit expensive. But I would advise you to look at the Adobe Suite resources that are available. And again, it does come at a cost, especially if you're doing it as an individual as opposed through an organization.
Saira, where do you get yours for your review?
Yeah, I feel like I use a lot of CDC images, but I always reference them. And generally, there's always it's mentioned that it can be used for medical education, not for any other reason. So as long as you're transparent.
So you always reference that over there. And if you're going to cite, for example, an article, you can always put the article and link it. Always, I think something that I've seen sometimes that is criticized is always cite your source. And I guess that's something that you always also do for newspapers, and cite your source. If you're picking something up from somewhere else, cite them. Either put a hashtag or like their thread, but give them the importance and give them back that they are being the ones saying that. Another part is, we have very busy lives and everything, and it is something that I have struggled throughout is, and there used to be a great tool for Twitter to put things, but now that was gone. So what are the best tools for scheduling social media, or how do you schedule your posts if you don't have a lot of time? Or have someone who does it for you?
I will invite Dr. Butt to take a first stab at this question.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely easier with the X versus any other platforms where you can put it for several, we can just put a day or time. This is when you want this post to go. It's tough with the other platforms. I think what you can do is create the content and just have it ready, and just so that way it doesn't take you that long to post it that day. Maybe divide it between your peers if you're running a fellowship, between fellows and faculty if they can take turns, so everybody's not burdened. But yeah, I wish there was better ways to do it.
Yes. And adding on to that, at a cost, of course, I don't think there's anything really available there for free. Meta does a good job through their Meta Business Suite. I use it for my organization. I'm not 100% sure if there's a cost to it, if you're just using it for personal use or professional use. But then there are other tools such as Hootsuite, for example. It does, again, come at a cost, but that's something that can help you manage better if you're on a tight schedule and you're trying to schedule content to go out on a specific date. But again, nothing is really that easily accessible if it's for free. That's the biggest concern.
Like they say, there's nothing free there's no free lunch. And it actually gets a little complicated more if you go outside the English language. When I try to do this in Spanish, it actually takes me a little longer. So I do see that. So saying that, you always have to keep engaging. So if you want to go from being promoted and being someone who is an influencer, one thing that you do learn from the influencers that you have to put yourself out there. Don't put yourself out there. People are not going to be engaging with you. So with that, how do you see the role of social media in fostering interdisciplinary collaborations and knowledge exchange between, in this infectious diseases with other specialists, epidemiologists, emergency medicine, internal surgery, and other healthcare professionals? And I think both of you can answer that question.
Just, thinking at the overall, again, it ties back to the conversation we just touched on, which is starting with your brand, building a strong presence wherever it is that you're starting with, whether it is LinkedIn, Instagram, X, anything such. It all starts with how you set yourself up to see the result in the future. Because once you start networking, once you're connecting with the right people, once you start engaging, putting yourself out there, the algorithm will also allow you to be more visible to others. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. It's set up the right tone from the beginning, and you will be there once you're consistent.
Syra, any wisdom words from your
Yeah, I
side?
think it's just based on your content, whoever you want to get engaged with. So a lot of, ID and dermatology has overlap, or ID and pathology has overlap. And of course, we work with PharmD. So looking at their hashtags as well and using those in your creations, in your social media posts, so then you are visible to them as well. So if you want, speakership from those areas, you have to tag them, you have to have those hashtags so people know who you are and what your content is about. So yeah, it just takes time to build that, but it definitely can be done.
No, definitely. I can think of several examples. And for example, Penfield and Mark Schenter, who started doing diabetic foot infections, and they connected with Armstrong, who is a vascular surgeon, podiatrist, and they kind of did the guidelines. And there's also other ones, the famous wiki guidelines that are out there for endocarditis was started also as part of a Twitter discussion throughout. So there is ways to start managing interdisciplinary, look at their hashtags, look at what they say. If you're invited at one of their conference, use that to promote yourself. And, as we're trying to come up to a close, we have, Syra and Lula has told us, one is think about your brand. So how you want to brand yourself, that probably has a thought process, because we're good about putting pictures for our own, but how do you want to put there? The other one, think about how that brand is good. What do you want to do? You want to educate? Do you want to promote? You want to be just informative? How you're doing that, and then look at your sources, and then slowly build up. Then use the Bloom, the modified Bloom. And looking ahead, how do you envision social media evolving as a tool for advancing ID research, surveillance, and other interventions?
To give a general answer, honestly, if you look at some of the latest research, if you ask, that kind of involves of asking people, what do you use to stay on trend or to keep up with the news? I guarantee you the top 3 answers involve social media. So it is definitely a tool that is efficiently available to you as an easy access, as easy as having it on your palm, to really allow you to stay informed within your field or just anything that you're interested in.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Syra.
I mean, adding to that, right? Like, this is where your patients get their information. This is the number one area where they'll ask is, internet, and then other things come later. And if you don't want all these misinformation, especially health misinformation, to be out there, then we have to be out there with the appropriate education. So I feel like it's public service, really. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think social media is here to stay. I mean, the way, a lot of us keep up, I look at the friends I seen as a conflict, one of the associate editors for OFIT, how things have changed. They're using more visuals to get the point across, and then those visuals can be used for presentations. So that's how you get to know. I can say also conflict, Sarah Dong from Febrile Podcast, how she started and where she is. She's just to, do a trend. She started with a podcast, got herself outside promoted, and now IDSA is collaborating with her and the Febrile Podcast to be more. So there are ways, but it does take time and it takes initiative. It's not that easy to create content and that content to be trendy enough for everybody else to pick up. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be creative, you have to be consistent, you have to be hardworking. It is not as easy as it looks. Like, if you really want to put good content, it takes time and energy.
I agree. And again, just ties back to how it is that you set yourself up when you're building your presence in social media? Where is it that you're trying to go to? How do you want people to see you? Everything ties back to your brand. We encourage you to stay consistent. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to mean posting every day, but it's just keeping up with engagement with others as well. But every small thing matters. And again, it takes time.
So kind of with that, it kind of summarizes the whole social media content for everybody. I know time is a commodity. It is something that we don't have a lot. Lula did tell us some of the paid uses that we can use. Before X, Twitter had a good way of, getting the tutorials up there. One way is to sometimes create them on a PowerPoint and then use kind of more of a copy paste and then go through there, or Canvas if you want to do it. But start lurking, start seeing what you want, start thinking about your brand. So lurk around, see where you are, what you want to do, build your brand, get yourself promoted, have good content, be mindful of the political arena. And if you don't want your mom or your parents to know about it is, please don't post it. And patient information is always, healthcare information is always something that we have to be careful there. And I can tell you that I've been, we all learn from one way or another when we got this self. And if you don't know, ask. That's the best thing. Any parting words from Sarah or Lula as we close up? Anything else that we have our social media prime people?
No, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And again, that link to the LinkedIn optimization tool is accessible to everyone. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about it, just start today. Don't wait around. Just consume, even if you don't do anything, but get started. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for having both. And now I send it back to Ayana as we close up.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was a really great discussion. Thank you, Lula and Dr. Butt, for just so much great information. This is going to be an awesome resource for our mentees for this program. And we will repost the LinkedIn optimization tool. Oh, it's already been uploaded on Cooper, so thank you for that, Amari. So just as we're about to close out, if we've missed any questions or if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to email me. The email address is at the very last slide of the presentation. Yeah, I want to recognize everyone who participated again, Dr. Butt, Lula, and then Dr. Layla Colborn for moderating this discussion. Thank you all. If you wish to revisit the webinar, you can see the recorded session on our YouTube channel. This is the QR code for our private YouTube channel for all of our webinar series. And you can subscribe. We'll have them uploaded the day after every webinar. Our next webinar is actually next Monday. So that one is actually going to be focused on harnessing physician-pharmacist collaboration in antimicrobial stewardship. It's going to be at the same time on Monday. This will be our last Monday webinar. Some of the dates will change moving forward. So yeah, please make sure that you all register for that. Thank you, Lula, for dropping in the registration link. And finally, we post about all of our content, upcoming events, things like that on Cooper. So you can follow us on socials, but most of the content will be on the Cooper platform. So yeah, thank you all again and have a wonderful rest of your day.